Hello everyone, this is Actual Squirrel today. I just got so excited about something today. I went to Half Price Books and I found this for $1 and I got a little more excited about it than I probably should have. Listened to it and I just fell in love with it right away, and then my brain had like a little grain of an idea. That idea turned into a thought, the thought started turning into a script, and suddenly I realized that I'm going to be doing an extra video before I go on the trip, which is fine. So today shall be called Act 15, Acts and Novel Formulations / Clatter in Discord. It's a crossover today, and it is called the Don Quixote and the Don Quixote and Man of La Mancha review. So what I figure I'll do is talk a little bit about source material, because source material is actually a really big deal. Talk a little bit about how these things work. I had a second thought that dug in that, let's see how deep I want to go down that rabbit hole. And then we'll tie it up with review and a couple of songs in it that I really like from that album, because for some reason that album just really hit. So here's your hot take, only like 60 years later, because it was originally released in like 1965, and there's several standards on it. So originally, you got this. I'll be honest, I'm cheating a little on the novel part. This might be a fantastic novel formulation, but it's also very big. It is. Technically, it's 2 books, but let's see here. It is almost 1,000 pages, according to this, and it's tiny font. And my brain just says no thank you. But I love the concept, I love the world. I've always had a soft spot for Don Quixote as a character. I got the book a long time ago. I've never read the book. So I'm going off of what Wikipedia said and some other stuff I've learned in the process before. Don Quixote started off as a book in 1605. It is probably, to non-Spanish speakers, the most famous Spanish-written novel in the world. It's actually written in 2 parts, in 1605 and 1615. It was translated in English in 1612 and 1620. So this thing's been around for a long time, like 500 years. It's considered to be one of the first modern novels. And it's one of the most translated and best-selling novels of all time. He's an iconic character. He is responsible for influencing so many things throughout history. It was written by Miguel de Cervantes, and the basic storyline, which maybe Don Quixote is that common, this is redundant, I'm not sure. I know if you ever hear the word quixotic, I'll slow down and say it right, that comes from this. It's kind of being pleasantly delusional. Basic storyline is a member of the lowest nobility in Spain in the 1600s, named Alonso Quijano, reads a whole bunch of chivalric romances, which are basically adventure stories with romance attached to it. He's in his 50s, he's bored, he's lived a boring life, and out of nowhere he decides to self-brand himself as Don Quixote, and he's going to go out and prove that all these things he reads need to be put into the world. Along the way, he picks up a simple farmer who's named Sancho Panza. He says, "You are now my squire." And for whatever reason, this guy goes along with it. He goes into his barn and he finds a workhorse. He names the workhorse Rocinante, and he grabs some crappy armor, and he goes out and he decides he's going to go right the wrongs of the world. Another character that comes through that you might hear occasionally as a name is the name Dulcinea. That comes from this too. Dulcinea, depending on the origin, from here it looks like she was just a workhorse. She was just this woman, and for some reason, Don Quixote just fell in love with her, and he rebranded her from Aldonza Lorenzo to Dulcinea de Toboso. And curiosity had me, since this is writing, I knew it was novels, there's usually a punch or there's a hook in the names. And what it is Dulcinea del Toboso means sweet one or sweetness. Dulcinea is sweet. And Toboso is like a dirty term, is a derogatory term towards dirty. So it's kind of like filthy, disgusting, but more vulgar. So sweetness of the beauty, or the sweet one from the beauty, is kind of what he turned the name into. And then he goes off and does a bunch of adventures. Have you ever heard of fighting windmills or all that kind of stuff? This is all Don Quixote. Don Quixote is as prevalent in culture as all the other people who say that you can't speak English without speaking Shakespeare, which is true, but overstated. It's kind of like you can't talk about 60s music without talking about the Beatles. In case you heard, there were other bands that existed in the 60s besides the Beatles. I've heard a couple of them. I like them. As a side digression, they're not even my favorite British invasion band. That's probably the Kinks, but that's another day, another time, another conversation. In 1965, going forward about 450 years or so, a couple of people got together and they created something called Man of La Mancha. Man of La Mancha started off in 1965 as a Broadway play. It ran for 2,328 performances, which puts it up there with the all-times. There's very few that get up to that kind of number. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's Cats might actually be the longest running of all time. Either that or it's Fantastics. If someone's a big musical buff, a big Broadway buff, go ahead and correct me or validate my answer. I think I read it's either Cats or Fantastics. I'm not exactly sure. One of the things that makes it unique about the source is it's got no violins or traditional orchestral strings, that kind of stuff. So it's got like double basses, it's got flamenco sounds, it's got very Spanish sounds into it. It's also got an earthy, grounded sound. Listening to it, I can definitely see why it became a big deal, because a lot of the themes in it, which we'll get into when we get into some of the songs, a lot of the songs are talking about kind of fighting impossible causes, or seeing beauty in the dirt, or elevating people above what you see them to be. There's a really sharp song, which, okay, we'll talk songs, because my head wants to go there. There's one that everyone kind of knows, I Am I, Don Quixote, Man of La Mancha, which is kind of his big opening thing when he starts. He has one called The Impossible Dream, which has become a standard for everyone to sing. And it talks about to reach the unreachable star, to do all this kind of stuff, and it's kind of empowering. It is an empowering song. It's silly, but it is very empowering. He has another song called I Like Him on it, which is sang by Sancho Panza, and he's let off asking, what do you like about him? He says, I don't know, I just like him. And he goes through, like, he'll just stand beside him because he admires him and he loves him. There's a part where he talks about lifting up Dulcinea that's really interesting as a song, and she's left going, why do you love me? Why do you care? Why are you treating me this way? Do you not see what I am? And that's a pretty powerful song. One of the things, and I guess you can go off the soundtrack, the Broadway soundtrack, I haven't actually seen the stage play, and there is a movie version of it, which was done in '72. I wrote that down so I could find it. It had Peter O'Toole, and it had Sophia Loren, and big actor in those eras, and Sophia Loren was like one of the beauties in the late 60s and early 70s. She aged pretty well too, but that was when she was like the thing. It was produced by an Italian company, and I think it had mixed reviews from what I scanned. If you're curious about some of the stuff I'm seeing, you can go onto Freevee or Amazon Prime if you have Prime, and you can watch it for free. One of the songs on here that really surprised me was I'm Only Thinking of Him. If you get bored, maybe pause this, listen to it. But it's interesting because it's shown from the perspective of his family and how they keep saying, but we're only doing this for him, we're protecting him, and somehow they slide in line, but he's wrecking a reputation, but we're only doing this for him. And I thought that was really edgy at the time. It was kind of interesting because you can tell that he's definitely crazy through the songs. Like, there's something he's either passionate or obsessed, and I'm not sure which one. You can definitely read what you want and read in that one. And then you get to the end, and Aldonza, who's Dulcinea, comes in, and she actually fights for him to keep his dream, because she realized, even though in this version she's a lady of the night, she realizes that he made him think. Let me step back to say this. He made her think that she could be more than what she was. And when she watched this person who thought that she could be so amazing lose his own faith, she actually fought for him to get his own faith. And there's an interesting twist in the story that the crazy gets these people around. Everyone thinks that he has no idea what he's doing, which he doesn't really. He probably causes as much damage as he does good. But somehow along the way, he ends up inspiring people who actually end up changing and improving their life. And she ends up kind of speaking up and being like, "Step up! I need you to be my Don Quixote again, so I can go be Dulcinea." I thought that was a really interesting perspective on relationships, how people can make everyone better. You can kind of step up, and even if it's not completely true, sometimes by following that dream and getting enough people around it, you can make those impossible things true. It's not as simple in this stuff, and this is where I'm going to bridge into where I notice I'll go silly and then serious, and then probably close out with the review here. This isn't an easy. It isn't an easy soundtrack or script to go into, because they're showing that he definitely is crazy. But through this craziness and his passion, he has moments that he does actually make the world better. And if he didn't have that craziness, it didn't have that obsession to follow the silly chivalric codes that he was doing, the world would have been a less interesting, less better place. But the casualty was kind of his own sanity, his own being. And to the point where once he started getting drugged down by the world, he started wondering, like, why am I doing this? There is a character, and I find this humorous, it's more of just a crossover thing. It's made by Bob Burton. It's an independent comic. It was done in the early 80s. And the character's name is the Flaming Carrot. The reason I bring it up is he's very much a Don Quixote character, and I just think he's funny. If you ever saw the movie Mystery Men that was done in the early 2000s, like late 90s, early 2000s, this is where the characters came from. But his origin is probably one of the best, most ridiculous origins I've ever heard. This guy was set on a bet to read 5,000 comics over the weekend. He made the bet, and he came out on Monday with web feet, a carrot head, and flames where the top of the carrot would be. And now he was a superhero. And it's very Don Quixote-like, where he just got so obsessed that everything he digested, he became. I do think there's a darker variation that people probably don't attach to it, but I was thinking about it, and I don't know if I have a full thought to it, but I think it's interesting. And that's Batman in some ways is a very dark shadow version of Don Quixote. Because you have a person who had all the wealth, all the upbringing, all that kind of stuff, like Don Quixote, and then he had the except his was triggered a tragedy, but that created obsession. And so he became obsessed with making sure that nobody else went through that pain and the torment. And if you really think about what Batman's doing, it's crazy. You're going to get dressed in a suit, you're going to go out and fight crime, you're going to put your own life at risk while risking your own personal life. And you get to the point that some versions of Batman are to the point that he has no personal life anymore. He's been completely absorbed into a false persona. They basically took this character that was designed almost to be satire, and they played him straight. They said, no, here's a guy who really believes he is all those things. And that made me rethink Batman as a character. And especially how he's so different than Superman, because Superman was driven for an entirely different reason. Superman was driven because it's the right thing to do. Whereas Batman is always trying to fill some hole with an obsession, very similar to Don Quixote, who's looking at a world that he felt that he should have engaged with, but he never did, and now he's going to over-engage to try to show the world how it really should be running. And he's using essentially fantasy and fiction to try to change a non-fiction world. As for the album here, Man of La Mancha, let's see here. Songs that are amazing. Let's do a couple songs here. I haven't checked this. Yeah, I'll leave that for the next video. I'll check and then I'll know. I know I'm getting close to 100 views. So for everyone who has viewed, thank you so much. It's awesome. I don't know what it means to the rest of the YouTube world, but it means a lot to me. So these songs here are probably the ones everyone knows, but they're amazing. And we'll put a review on your rating. Where are we going here? It's like the longest 30 seconds. I apologize. Normally my squirrel thoughts are more vibrant and squirrely. So, the Man of La Mancha soundtrack. The songs are really cool. The kind of the main one that becomes a theme, the Man of La Mancha, that's awesome. You have the Impossible Dream. I like this version best, probably. There's something kind of cool about it. This is actually off of original cast, so you're talking the 1965, the first run. There's lots of people who've played him. I was actually surprised by that. And then I really like him. I just think it's a fun counterpoint. It's Sancho Panza singing about what he loves about Don Quixote. And rating-wise, I'll give the album about 8.5. Depending on your taste, it hasn't aged well. I love it because it's a unique Broadway musical sound. So if you're really not into Broadway, you're probably not going to be fully won over. And there's a little bit of psychedelic in that sort of 70s sound, or that late 60s sound that bleeds in there. It's not your thing. If you don't like the hippie kind of things, then it may not be your motion either. But the lyrics are phenomenal, and the way they sing on that, it sounds really different than any other Broadway thing. Otherwise, that is that diversion. I promise the next video will actually be more about the Equalizer. If you like what you've seen, you like the diversions, well, you know what? Every road trip's fun. There's always that one stop. So here's your stop. We got lost, and hopefully you bought some really cool gifts from the random gift shop. I don't know what they would look like on this one. Maybe it would be a horse, or if you follow his lore, he ends up getting a barber's helmet and calls it a golden helmet. So maybe it's a bowl so you can shave. If you like what you saw, hit the like button. If you have any fun comments about Don Quixote, all this kind of stuff, the Batman thing that I brought up, go ahead and add it on the bottom. I'd love to hear what you're thinking. And if you like where I'm wandering and like the divergence I take, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And I'd love to see more subscriptions. Love to know more of what you guys are thinking out there. Otherwise, have a really good rest of your day.